Welcome to the Building Doctor Show with Jens Johansson.
Okay, so fireproofing inside, we're going to talk some, condos and HOA communities. So the photo is an example of what we call interior sill plate penetrations. So all these holes, the electrician has to drill a bunch of holes to get his wire down. The ductwork guy has to cut a big hole to get his duct work down. And so you'll see this red or pink spray foam, and that fills the gap. So again, we're talking airflow. So if I have a fire downstairs, it can go around the wire or through those holes, around these things, if there's no sealant there. So this spray foam fire sealant around these penetrations stops the fire spread. And then again, roof composition is another big one. Metal or asphalt or, several slate, tile, stone. So lots of things you can use to reduce fire from basic design things and basic construction things. So then part two is that draft stopping, or that we call it party walls and or firewalls. And so it's how you separate the attic between units. And so here's a picture down here. You can see the trusses. That's the bottom of the roof sheathing. I'm looking up. So here's this party wall, and it's drywalled off and at least fire taped. That's that first layer of tape and mud. It doesn't have to be finished because we're not painting it, but it stops the fire. So if I remember on that first picture, I had fire coming up the outside, getting in through the eaves, really causing havoc in here, but not getting over to the other side and causing more damage. So I would say half the attics we go into have firewalls, and another half of those aren't done right. They aren't taped. There's big holes in them. So it's really important to check that. And then from a previous episode, good firewalls prevent froggers, P-H-R-O-G-G-E-R, from kind of going in between units. So we did another video on that, and we'd see an unscrupulous person here go up into their attic access and then walk over and find their neighbor's attic access and drop down in and steal their things and do what they wanted to do in there and then sneak away. And so if you got a good wall there, you keep that from happening. So good for fire spread and frogger control. Okay, so fireproofing again. Here's our gyp sheathing, or what's left of it. And so this is an example of water intrusion really getting in behind the WRB and flashings and siding and really causing damage. So we can see the gyp sheathing crumbling and flaking away and just missing here and here. It's just washed away. And so now I've got nice, soft, punky wood that really lights on fire and burns really well, saying it's not soaking wet. So that's the point of making sure that we've got good gyp sheathing, good waterproofing details, so that when you do have a fire, your components are working well together. And so window ratings, sidings and decks, thinking about the robustness of this. So if I'm in more of a wildfire prone zone, I'm going to be higher robustness. If I'm in Pacific Northwest, where there's not a lot of fires, and the trees are all cut down, and I don't have a lot of brush, maybe I don't have to go as robust. And so you can talk to your building envelope designer and say, how should I start planning for this? We need a new roof in 5 years. We need new siding and windows in a few years. Now's the time to start thinking about it. Landscaping, defensible space. Remember, the houses that stood, they dug out the lawn. They put in rockery, river rock, concrete, pavers, maybe some bark, maybe some accent stones, some small brush or bushes, landscaping. But very easy to maintain, probably very drought tolerant. And there's nothing there to burn, and it gives you that space, that defensible space, so that fire can't come right up against your building. So this is a good example of landscaping using a fire-wise landscaping. So chimney's clean, 100 feet of garden hose that's hooked up and attached. So if you do have a problem, you can pull the hose out real quick and deal with it. They have a 30-foot zone saying vegetation is mowed, I guess, 30 feet and 100 feet. So every lawn is mowed 100 feet away from the house. No standing tall grass. Grass is green and mowed. Wood piles, firewood piles, combustibles, 30 feet away from the house. Sorry, you got to put on your slippers to go get some more firewood. Sheds not built under your deck with gas cans in them. They're over there. They're away from the place. The lawnmower and all the whatever is over there. Compost piles, piles of leaves and brush, whatever it is, away from the house again. And then this is always a good one. The driveway is accessible. It's clearly marked. Address is visible. So when I do have to call, they know where to go. They can find the address and get there quickly. Now, how we're going to talk about how earthquakes affect the building. And so we want to think about building materials. So wood frame has some good flex and bend. I'm holding up a piece of wood. I can bend it. It's got resilience. If I bend it too far, it'll snap and break. We don't see a lot of that in earthquake where the wood actually breaks in half. We just see a lot of the bending and then the components fall off. So the brick or the other things crack. Steel, here's just a little knife. Steel has a lot of flexibility. It can bow, it can bend and not break. But the biggest ones are the masonry, brick, and concrete. Brick has no flexibility. It cracks, right? Even with a little bit of movement, it cracks. So understanding how your building's set up, think of your building floors like boxes stacked one on top of another. And so in a shake, we want to keep those boxes together, keep them attached, so we don't end up with one box hanging off that side, another box hanging off that side. And then we also want to take that stack of boxes and tie it down to the foundation so that it doesn't slip off its foundation and kind of then tip over. So we want to tie it to the foundation, tie the boxes together, and tie the roof on top of that, whether it's a sloped roof or a flat roof. Tie those things all together. So as we're shaking and even going up and down, the pieces aren't bouncing and moving and shifting and all that. Okay, earthquake proofing. Well, I don't know if it can be proofed, but kind of 5 things. We can create a flexible foundation. We can counter some of these forces with dampening or, some kind of way to dampen the vibration or shake. We can shield the building from vibration. That's those isolators. We can reinforce the building structure. We can make it stronger, make it attached better. That was that unreinforced masonry where we can attach it. And then we can use earthquake resistant materials, and that's more in new design. So we're really looking at items 2 and 4. We can do some dampening and you can reinforce the building structure. And so, well, we'll get into a few of those slides, but when people come to us and they say, I want to do some earthquake, reinforcing, it's like, okay, well, there's a few ways to do it and a few of them are expensive. So how far do you want to go? And so we'll talk about that a little bit too. Okay. Creating a flexible foundation. So this is a little video here. See, these are these isolators. And if I can build from scratch in an earthquake prone area, I can put these isolators below and the building really isn't moving that much. The ground is moving, but those isolators take up the movement. So we basically have a special foundation that absorbs some of those shakes. Oops, I don't want to do that again. I want to go to the next slide. Then we can counter these forces with dampening or pendulum equipment. And so the building's going to move, but hydraulics will actually dampen or dissipate. And so it's very similar to shock absorbers used in your cars. They kind of help shock the tire help dampen the tire as it goes over the potholes. And so this type of hydraulic nature will help reduce that. Shielding the building from vibrations, more vibrational control. These are dampers and diagonal bracing. And so when you've got some hydraulic fluid that slows down the movement and doesn't let it whip out of control, and they're designed to work together. And so basically they ease the force on the building. This is retrofitting the building. I would say this is reinforcing the building structure. If you don't have this, like in older buildings, we would be putting in shear wall, so that diagonal bracing would keep the structure from turning into a house of cards and just tipping over. The diaphragm, remember the picture of the roof, the horizontal diaphragm. So again, plywood sheeted, and this shear wall, plywood sheeted, even some diagonal bracing. And then the moment resisting frames. So where the floor lines or joists come into the wall, really bolting those two things together and actually letting the studs flex and bend in between those attachments. And so playing this video, you can kind of see how these things move. And you can see that moment resisting frame, we're allowing the stud to flex, but the bolt and hardware are keeping it together. So this is really the most common retrofit. We're doing some diagonal bracing or shear walls. We're putting in additional diaphragms on roofs and floor plates, and then we're reinforcing any place you have these connections with good beams and hardware. Basically, earthquake resistant materials. We talked a little bit about this. Structural steel will allow bending without breaking. It might bend and deform and still be screwed up, but it won't break. Wood, again, has some flexibility, and then you have some fancy materials or original natural bamboo materials. That's why it's a good building source, but they can move and allow for movement and not break, unlike brick and unreinforced concrete.
What strengths of women in leadership and leadership in general? Let's talk a little bit about the strengths and what do we think good leadership brings to the table, both in female leadership and in leadership in general.
I think if you go back in time, I don't even know how much time because I wasn't alive yet, but go back in time. Women have always kind of been project managers. If you think about it, historically they maintained homes and children and threw dinner parties and were on a lot of, I don't know, I'm going to call them committees. I don't know what they were called back in the day, but all the little clubs and card clubs and things like that. And, so being able to manage all of those things still applies to today and all of the different things now that women are doing that they weren't doing back then. And so I think that multitasking, adapting, being empathetic and whatnot kind of all plays together in that leadership role that I'm not going to say all women are, leadership bound, but most women probably have a leadership type of mentality in them. And so I think it just is great historically how we've grown and been able to utilize those tools still today.
Well, going further back in history, I think I had mentioned that there's actual science to this, and it goes back to hunter-gatherer days.
Yeah.
So the notion of the way we solve problems, I'm sure we have all had a gentleman in our life that may think that we overthink things or perhaps make things too complex. That actually goes back to our primitive beginnings. The hunter mentality is, I see the thing, I kill the thing, I eat the thing. With the gathering mentality, it's, I've got to know what we can eat, where it is, how it grows, when to pick it, what's poisonous and what isn't. There's just so much more complexity that goes into that level of, procurement for survival than I see the thing, I kill the thing, I eat the thing. And both have a time and place in problem solving. I think that's why teams of, a balanced dynamic in leadership work so well, because you do need the person that can say, like, here's the linear execution of this problem. And you do also need the person that says, okay, let's consider all things so that,
Right.
we can predict what we can predict. And then when the thing that we didn't predict happens, you come back into the see the thing, kill the thing, eat the thing mentality. So we need both, but next time you're told as a woman that you're overthinking things, you let them know that you're just respecting your cave woman ancestors.
Or over communicating something.
Over communicating.
Yeah.
Yes.
You just
We
made
made
a
a problem here. We communicate.
point. I have a lot of clients, board members that they're so quick to just act on things. And so part of my role is saying, hey, whoa, like, hold on, let's gather all the information we need to be able to make a sound decision in this, because otherwise we can make mistakes and whatnot. So I appreciate that, the thinking about everything through first is a great mindset to have.
So it's interesting you talk about the two sides, Kelly, because I work with my husband, right? So that in itself is a unique situation, but I think what works out really well, the yin yang thing totally applies to us. He's got the entrepreneur mindset of potential growth and ways to improve, expand, whatever. And it's never been brought up as an overthinker, but I'm what's our exposure to this? It could be perceived also as pessimism or defeatism, but it's taking that big picture and saying, okay, if we do that, what are the risks, and are we willing to take them? It doesn't mean that we don't take the risks, but let's know the risks going in. And I think that also applies to whether it's design or association management, right? It's like educating your client on those risks. It's not saying you can't do them, but let's say, okay, you want aluminum rails or you want cable railing versus wood picket railings, right? So there's a cost difference, right? It's not necessarily it's a choice. There may be a longevity issue with that, but ultimately you just need to give them enough information so they can make good decisions. And I think that that's my role here in the company is that, I do look at exposure. I mean, we have company vehicles. So every time I see one of my vehicles out there, it's great. It's a billboard, but it's also exposure to the company because somebody might hit it. So, it's like, it's that mom is just like that worrying mom is kind of out there. And I'm sure there are men that do the same thing, but that is my role here is just, let's look at the big picture as well.
Jessica, what do you think about how it pertains to leadership? I mean,
I am the queen of overthinking. I think that there's a thing called the Jessica 2 a.m. club where I will wake up in the middle of the night and I will text people because I will take something very, very small and turn it into this catastrophic thing. And it goes from 0 to 100 real fast. And so for me, that overthinking is just ingrained in my DNA, but it helps, again, break things down of, what color is it? What does that mean in terms of XYZ? What does that then affect? And what does that affect? And, all these little parts and pieces, that's just kind of how my brain thinks of, especially, or if something's discontinued and we need to reselect something in the project, what is that snowball effect? How does it relate to all the other materials on the building? What happens when you turn the corner? What happens when the roof comes over the edge? Like, that's how I think. And with that also then comes communication of, here's what happened, here's why it happened, here's what we think should happen, and then over communicating to that to the clients and even internal events as well that happen, within a team of, all right, we made a mistake, let's discuss it, what happened, how can we build on it, and just kind of bringing in emotions, bringing in compassion. Is also, typically a woman characteristic. And I think it all plays in. And, when men have those characteristics, I think it's great. And I think that also makes a great leader because, no one wants to get yelled at a job, whether it's your fault or not, ever. No one should ever be yelled at on a job. So I think just having a variety of those typically women characteristics or female characteristics are not necessarily a bad thing, but work in most situations.
Absolutely. I think, the empathy thing It is a strong suit for a lot of women. I used to say a lot that I was an empath, and around the office, it kind of got like, but now I simplify it and I tell them that I'm a witch with magical powers, and that somehow is more palpable to them. So I have a broom above my desk, and I really run with that. But I think in terms of leadership, I'm a big believer that great leaders make great leaders, but you can also become a great leader by perhaps having a not so good leader. And you learn as much by watching it done wrong as watching it done right. I've had some not so great leaders at previous positions, and so that has helped form a lot of how I want to lead or not want to lead. But having great leadership currently and here, I think really comes down to empowerment, which is the whole reason we're here. And I think anybody does better when they're empowered to do their most and their best, and being told that they're trusted, they earn the trust, so they get the trust, and being given that confidence to try things and do things and strive to be the best at things. And you don't necessarily always see a lot of stories in a male dominated industry where one might be prone to empower a woman to move into a leadership role.
Okay, so access control systems. We're talking about that typical call box. We're talking about fobs and key cards and mobile app-based systems. Kind of the pros and cons of each. There's cost and convenience and reliability, but some of the cons of these call boxes. How hard is it to break into them, and what do you do about that?
Some of them look super secure from the outside. They're, big steel metal boxes, right? But they use a simple latch key. And
So the latch key is like that post office
literally
box.
turns a little latch.
Yeah, okay.
Right? That little metal bar, right? It's amazing how easy you can get into those with a screwdriver even. And when inside every one of these call boxes, they're all basically identical on the same side. There's a push button for an emergency release for the door. That's what your criminals are trying to get access to. When you close that panel back up, even though it's not latched and secured, to everybody using the call box and everybody walking by, it looks like that call box is closed. There's ways to defeat that from happening, and it's super cheap and super cost effective. But if you don't know about it, you don't know.
That's what? That's reinforcing it, or
it's so basically the outside of the boxes are pretty thick, heavy gauge steel.
Mm-hmm.
Drill a hole, run a steel bar, a thick, heavy steel bar through it, out of the way so you can still read everything, and and then put 2 locks on either side. It's super cheap. But now nobody can pry that door open to get to that emergency call button. If your service tech needs to get to it, or you need to get to it as a building owner, it's 2 keys, right?
Right. Got it. So strong steel box, but just a cheap little file cabinet lock on it that you can defeat with a screwdriver. Wow.
Yep.
And then maybe a clear piece of tape to kind of tape the door shut. And
most of the time they don't even bother to do that.
Wow.
So same thing with key fobs. They're amazing systems. Love key fobs. We use them in our business. We recommend them for our clients. It's really nice when you lose one, or you let an employee go, or a resident moves out, that you can deactivate that, right? Now they can't get the building. But generally speaking, this is where the human factor comes into everything. Most properties like to kind of add a fee to it to replace the cost of the fob. They're a little bit expensive, and B, to discourage people from constantly coming to them and losing their fob and actually, maintaining it, right? But at the same time, that also discourages people from telling you they lost their fob.
Right. I don't want to pay $250. So, I'll just borrow my wife's or roommates.
So if they see you drop your fob on the way out to pick up your car, right, when you leave, now they have a fob to the whole building and your apartment, right?
Oh, so you'd be hiding the fob in a potted plant, and
and then if you don't report for 3 days, 4 days, this person has 3 to 4 days to have unlimited access to the building.
To move in and be a frogger. Yes.
Yep. Or squatter.
Yeah, right. Okay, so some tips. We're getting into, best practices for managing lost or duplicated fobs. You obviously talked about the reporting and not making it embarrassing or too much of a penalty to get a new fob, but also being able to deactivate that lost fob or deactivate that person that has moved out. And then it also gives you a little bit of an access log for monitoring who is coming and going, why are they coming
Who
and going
keeps
at weird
propping your
hours.
doors open?
And
Right.
correct, yeah, the whole prop door open thing. But that kind of brings up the management of the system, and it kind of can get a little bit different there too. So who manages it? Who deactivates it? Who has control of the files? So is this the board president? Is this the manager? There's time and reachability. Are they attentive? Do they have time to reprogram and add things? Are they on vacation and we just can't get another fob till they return? And so then you also have kind of securing the who has control of the files. Well, if the board president doesn't like me and they're seeing my, you know, or they're seeing somebody's girlfriend come and go, and then all of a sudden, like now we get into all these human issues of, who's a good person for that, and so it kind of gets sticky and gets complicated. So
Generally, my recommendation is have at least two people who
right.
are not only actually available to do it and have the time they invest in it, especially if you're looking at a community where that position isn't a paid thing, right? So your HOAs, for example, like it can be pretty time intensive, and especially when there's software updates, chasing down batteries, fixing errors with the system.
Yep.
That phone call that comes at 3 o'clock in the morning quite often, right?
Mhm.
It's always good to have another person who's available and then just take turns. So that nobody's getting burnt out on it.
So is that something a security company like you would do? Is that part of your?
This is something that we work on the consulting side to make sure that
Okay.
they have these little steps in place. And again, a lot of what we do is we work on not so much on the technical side of the house. We have partners that we kind of push the technical stuff out to. We work on the human side. So it's developing plans, getting written, procedures up, and letting them know so they have a roadmap to when there's a problem that's like, oh, I just turned to page 3. Sweet. This is what I need to do.
Right.
Or this is who I need to call.
Yeah.
And then that person knows also why they're getting called and what their responsibilities are.
So along with management of the system, we've got setting access permissions. Everybody's got a house cleaner, or they've got some guests, or they've got vendors. And then don't forget about our Amazon and FedEx people, as well as fire and medical. They can't have access to the call box. They have to bust the window and get in. And so they're damaging more things. So notifying these people, letting them know. But, management of the system, kind of that discretion confidential that I talked about. Just making sure they're not posting. Look, I found out whose dog is pooping all over everything, and they post videos to the Facebook page, and it really hurts or becomes more of an issue. But kind of the management is something to think about. So now talking about video systems, and we've got a couple of site maps here. What we're looking for is kind of the how much video coverage do I have? And so starting with just kind of a basic outline of your building and kind of plotting, if I put a camera here, I'll be able to see this back deck and these windows, but you can pretty quickly notice that this window and this half of the building is not surveilled and this half of the building is not. And so you're kind of picking and choosing, but it's helpful to put this plan together and think about a no blind spot design. But again, in the video world, we're looking for proof and deterrence, not so much, we're not stopping the crime, we're recording it to happen, but we're looking for that data there.
Yep.
And so
cameras are the rules. What we tell all of our clients, cameras are amazing. They're really great for recording the crime after it happened or when it happened. And then helping you solve that crime, right?
Yeah.
Hopefully.
So
terrible at stopping crimes.
Right.
They might dissuade somebody like, yeah, I'm probably going to get this on camera. They might see my plates when I come into the parking lot or whatever. But again, most of the time, if I don't want my car to get found out, what my license plate number of my car, I just unscrew the license plate. If I don't want somebody to see my face, I put a mask on.
Right.
And
so what
that
they
right now
solve
is socially acceptable in major cities.
What's that?
And all of that is socially acceptable and normal in major cities. So the car with no license plate and the guy with a mask isn't really going to stand out too much.
Not anymore. Yeah. So cameras are good in the sense they don't solve the problem, but they give evidence to file a police report, show patterns of behavior that can be changed. They can get some additional police monitoring. We can track bad guys as they walk down from property to property, as they hit that one and then they get kicked out of that one and go into the next one and go into the next one and go
Great
into
for
the next.
insurance.
Yeah.
Great for your insurance claims, your liability claims in case of lawsuit or, where everybody's getting sued these days. You want to, if you can record no, we didn't leave the puddle on the middle of the lobby floor for 6 days. Like the person came over here, dumped it out, and then slipped on it. Right. There's no negligence. So cameras do a lot of stuff, and they can save you a lot of money and a lot of headache, or they can help alleviate a lot of that.
Yeah. Proven whose car backed into the lobby entrance and damaged the fence. Yeah. They're
Exactly.
good for proof. Here's another good kind of a site surveillance outline of a bigger building, maybe a bigger parking lot. And, you can kind of see these rings. Maybe this camera has these angles. There's 2 cameras out here. One of the drawbacks is obviously these bigger cameras require power. And so we're starting to trench to get some power out here. We're trenching around the fence line. We're putting in new things.
The big question that you always want to ask is, is this a refit, or are we getting in at the beginning of the building design process? It's really cheap to put security cameras and plan for security systems and all of your security planning before the buildings actually starts being built.
Right.
It gets incredibly expensive when you have to come to a building that has been built since like 1930 and you're trying to renovate that to manage now data, electrical, and stuff where nobody thought you would ever need electrical or data.
Right.
Didn't need data at all for that matter.
Using this site plan and saying I've got 6, 7 cameras, I want a decent enough thing where I can read license plates. How much would this cost to add to an existing building? Is this
it could be tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Could over 100.
Yeah, it's going to depend on what kind of cameras you want, what kind of data management system you need, how many cameras you're going to put on the inside of the building, right?
Okay.
Are the cameras microphoned? Do they have night vision capability? Do they have thermal capability? That's becoming a thing, a trend now.
Yeah, those sound pretty fancy, but
yeah, are they fixed camera? Are they going to, pan tilt zoom? Are they going to auto track? Like the more feature rich you build into your system, it can be beneficial to you to a certain degree. It can get a little pointless at it as well. Right. You start moving out to your spectrum. But again, this is where a good security consultant with somebody who's an expert in these systems and developing and installing these systems can sit down with you and they can cover those costs ahead of time.
Why are they doing it? So here's a beautiful bar chart, but it goes 2018, 2019, 2020. What this bar chart says is this is based off the Palisades fire. And this study comes from Harvard and the Joint Center for Housing Studies. So you can look this up. You can Google this, Harvard University Joint Center for Housing Studies, insurance non-renewal rates in fire-prone areas. And what they talked about was 2 signs of, they call it instability in private residential insurance markets, are sharply rising insurance premiums and sharply rising non-renewal rates. And so this evidence comes from also a federal, where does it say there? Well, it says in my notes, a Federal Insurance Office, FIO report that shows premiums went up 9% above inflation between 2018 and 2022. And this is tracking the decline or the non-renewal rate. Percentage of policies not renewed due to risk profile of property or area. And this has to do, the yellow is the Palisades zip code. And the Palisades fire was in January 2025. Over 11,000 homes were totally destroyed. $53 billion in damage. And the insurance company's been tracking this since 2019. And so they've been saying, wait a second, something's going to happen here. So you can see in 2019, they have over a 3%. They're just not renewing 3% of the policies. and then 2, almost 2, over 2, and then drop back down to 2. So it's really weird. They were tracking this zip code for 5 years prior and not renewing. And so they were tracking fire risk and wildfire risk specifically. So here's what's going to happen in, kind of the next thing of condos and HOA risk. We have maintenance, we have claims or things like that. So my personal opinion is they're bringing this over in more of their risk management, and they're saying, hey, this is risky. So let's start tracking some of these. Let's make you have an inspection done, because some of these properties we see, and we'll go through some photos, are pretty wild in the sense of you guys haven't done anything for a long time. And so the insurance companies are saying, give me a report, give me something that shows this, that we can base you as a good, healthy risk to insuring you. So wildfires, they were tracking for years. It's coming to condos now. So another interesting thing, you can see the black line is nationwide total. Nationwide's at 1%, kind of across the board. California was kind of hovering around that, but in the Pacific Palisades, you're 300 times that, so 3x of the nationwide. So the requirements now, in the past 30 days, we've seen State Farm, Allstate, Progressive, and they're requiring this at renewal time, but we're also seeing it at new time. So this means if you're insurance shopping and, hey, I'd like to get a bid, my rates went up because we saw the rates rising in that last slide. Let's go get another bid. And then they're saying, okay, we want an inspection report. So this isn't just suggestions coming from your manager or consultant anymore. It's now becoming a requirement for coverage renewal. That's a proactive move by insurers in response to, one, I think, aging buildings. The older it gets, the more damage and exposure it has. And so it'd be interesting actually to see their non-renewal rates on the older buildings. But so we've got older buildings, we got increased claims and losses, we've got lack of prior inspection reports. That's one of the things we ask every board client of who else has been out of your property. Let's see the old reports. And well, of course we can't find them, and the file history is a mess. So okay, well, we'll go out, fresh set of eyes, and take a look around. Then I think the insurance company also got a little feedback of they used to send drones to do drone surveys. This was about 2 years ago, where they would just hire a drone operator, fly over the building, zoom in on some things, and people started complaining, what's that happening out there? And but when we look at the requirements, you'll see they're pretty similar to VA, Veterans Administration, or FHA loan and mortgage requirements. Check this, check this, check this, and then we'll write a loan on it. And so they're not that far off the line, but the insurance company's doing it, not just banking. So not universal yet, but we're seeing enough of a trend that it's time to start talking about it. Okay, so this is what builders risk insurance. So it came from, or it's primarily used in new construction. So when we're talking about existing condos, they're already built, they're already a condo, it's already this big, we have a property policy covering it. So new construction is, I've got a 5-story building, I'm building, and I'm on story 4, not quite done yet, can't quite get a property policy yet. I'm during construction, so it's at the builder's risk. The builder is under risk. I got to get this thing built, then get a policy for it. So the market moved in and said, here's a during construction builder's risk policy. Now on the remodels or the existing buildings, it provides a better, more umbrella type coverage of this gap or these times or these delay things we're talking about. So it'll cover damage to materials and equipment before they're installed, even on transport or delivery or stored on site. Covers damage to equipment. Here's the ladders and the pump jacks and the scaffolding and the rental forklifts and things like that. Oftentimes we'll cover losses due to theft and vandalism or an earthquake or something, natural disasters during construction. So again, the scaffolding or break-ins or just anything around that policy. And the big thing is delay costs and some additional weather events. And some of them have just weird. I've seen some really it's kind of umbrella like all-inclusive type coverage things. So it's great for coverage of all the gaps. And the good ones pay first, then subrogate later. Subrogate means one insurance company chasing another insurance company to get reimbursed. I've paid this, you now need to pay me back. And they do that behind the scenes and even years later. And so you can keep moving with your project. And so, in that, back to that 5-story building, I framed up 3 floors, and then the arsonist comes in and burns it down. Now I got to start all over. I got to take that pile of rubble and haul it away. Now I got to get new materials and maybe even redo the foundations because the foundations got hot and cracked and the steel warped. And, so it's that during construction, but also an umbrella for the big policy. And the other big thing to think about is builder's risk is for the project size and it's project based. So if we've got a $10 million project, we can get a $10 million policy. And how that's different is typically most subcontractors and even smaller generals have a $1 million CGL policy. And once that scaffolding lands on 10 Mercedes, that's their $1 million right there. So the policy is exhausted. It won't pay for anything else after that. And so having a project specific with a larger cost to cover that, I want to cover the whole job. It's a $10 million job, and I want to cover the cost of this. And so you can buy it per project cost. Okay, so the differences. So standard property policy protects a building as it exists, includes permanent structures, personal property, standard perils, fire, theft, etc. So the builder's risk covers buildings construction during these times, during the building or during the construction. The coverage for the standard policy doesn't cover, major alterations or that chain of events. I didn't contemplate, you having this and this and this and this going on. I was selling you a year-long property policy, assuming you would be doing normal condo things, but you're doing some extra stuff. So that's where the builder's risk comes in, covers, provides these additional things. And then your standard policy covers, if it's damaged after construction. This builder's risk is temporary during construction, during repairs, and it ends. So that's kind of the differences or how they kind of work together and supplement each other. So the myth, my homeowner's condo insurance covers flood damage. Nope. 2 different policies. Think of flood insurance like earthquake insurance. It's a separate policy. So standard property insurance specifically excludes flood damage and the related coverage. So obviously they can be expensive, but there are other contributing factors. So like the hurricane, like the mudslide, like the, or the high winds blew my shingles off, then the water came in. So what is the sequence of events here? But if you say, hey, my unit's flooded, well, they might believe you and they might deny based on you don't have flood coverage. So understand those differences. Okay, so again, a table comparing the 2. Standard property insurance covers burst pipes in the walls, water heater explosions, appliance failures, roof leaks, ice dams, wind-driven rain. Standard property policies do not cover, most water that starts outside the building and comes in, except rain and wind-driven rain. Sewer backups. And sometimes we require separate coverage there because it's a utility, but flood insurance covers that usually. Surface water runoff. And again, this is just a sheeting of water that you see running across the surface. groundwater seepage that's bubbling up, or it's just a high water table and it's flooding your basement. It's really not on the surface, but I know it's right there. And then this storm surge or this river flooding thing we've talked about. So tsunami, storm surge, or river overflowing its banks. Again, think big outside. Remember that picture we saw of the entire parking lot? The whole neighborhood is flooded. That is where flood insurance is needed. 30-day waiting period rule. You can't buy the day before the storm and you can't buy the day of the storm. There's usually a waiting period unless you just bought it, or policy updates or renewals or things like that. So plan ahead for these seasonal risks. So when you buy flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program, that's the think FEMA or NFIP, coverage doesn't start right away. They have this 30-day waiting period. Similarly, you can't buy wildfire insurance when the hillside's burning, that kind of thing. And so if there's a storm forecast, you can't buy it right before the storm. All right, so the 6 ways. We got roof leaks, that's the bulk water monster. We got attic ventilation issues, getting that science right. We'll obviously talk more about that. Extra ventilation, getting into the attic. So the attic is only designed to ventilate itself. So if I have a duct from a bath fan that's not connected, or just duct it into the attic, there's attic vents, it'll just breathe out, and dumping more ventilation into it. Resident generated issues. Now, these aren't as popular, but they're real. So we have, humans can do things to raise more condensation or water vapor into the attics. Remodeling disturbances, we'll talk about that. And then design concerns, either when Mother Nature fights back or when the science isn't quite right. So, when we think about bulk water, we think about drywall ceiling damage. Your drywall's dripping and blistering and bubbling, and you've got a bucket in your bedroom, or you've got towels on your windowsill, and there's just water pouring through. The attic ventilation, we have a lower E vent and an upper ridge vent, typically in a sloped roof. Talked about that. Extra ventilation, furnace ductwork, bath fans disconnected, things aren't sealed right. There's water vapor is getting there where it shouldn't be there. One of the biggest resident generated issues is not using that bath fan when we're taking a long shower. So think teenagers. Hey, when I come into the bathroom after your shower, why is the mirror all steamed up and the cabinets are wet? That water is moving upwards through the house and through the ceiling into the attic. And that remodeling, where we put a bunch of can lights in, especially in the top floor units. The guys would be in there, they'd cut a hole in the drywall, they'd kind of scoot the insulation away, they'd put their can light and never come back and pack the insulation back around it. So now we had an easy path for water vapor and heat to get up into that attic. And then design concerns are, shady environments built into the trees, never get sun to dry out. Maybe there's not a lot of air movement because of adjoining buildings, and the wind can't push through the event and out. And roofs with many angles. Here's an interesting dilemma. When we started in kindergarten drawing a picture of our house, our roof always looked like this. It had a little chimney and it had a little door on the house. And so that's how everybody thought a nice big sloped roof should look. Now we get roof lines that have some wings to them, and we've got water coming down into a valley, or we want to make a modern home and our roof line looks like this. And then we're trying to figure out how to ventilate it, trying to slope it, trying to do whatever with it. So design can also play a part of that, because, design's fun. We want a cool looking building. But now that we've changed the design, how does that make it work well? So.
First thing, phase one, the assessment and planning. I was talking a little bit about it before. We conduct a thorough inspection of existing plumbing system. We go through, we look at all the wet walls. We walk through with the testing company so that way they can, take samples for the walls that will be affected. We develop detailed repair plans and specifications, and then we put it out to bid and select a contractor. Phase two, scheduling. We create unit schedule with all unit finishes identified. That's for each unit. So when the contractor is bidding, they know what to expect in that unit. It's going to be sheetrock. If it's, the type of texture, if it's knockdown, if it's orange peel, this, that, the types of vanities and everything. And then we're also for the scheduling, we're looking at, okay, what building is the contractor going to start with? What side of the building? Like I was saying earlier, it's done by a stack. They do the work vertically, not horizontally, because that's how the plumbing is lined up. Phase three, material procurement. Order and receive all necessary plumbing materials and supplies. That was a problem during COVID. We had to get a lot of supplies in advance. Since then, that's kind of leveled out. Most of the stuff is very readily available, but still they need to get everything in advance. We don't want to start working on something and then say, oh yeah, we ran out of materials. That doesn't look good for anybody. And then after it's scheduled, we're at phase four here, the demolition and abatement. If asbestos is present, execute professional abatement procedures. That's what I was talking earlier. There's a company that comes in, that is all they do is abatement, is asbestos removal. And once that is out of the way, then the plumbing crew can come in and start rerunning the supply lines. Typically when they do the supply lines, well, I'm jumping in. So kind of phase four, phase five go together. You're demolishing the walls, you're getting access to the plumbing lines. They'll typically install the new plumbing, the supply lines, they'll run them right next to the existing lines. So then that way they don't have to keep shutting water off, turning water on. A lot of these buildings that we go to, I've had a couple of properties where they only had a shut off out at the road to shut the water off to the entire property. First thing we do is start putting in shutoffs for each building, and then we get for the stack. And ultimately, at the end of the day, each unit has its own shutoff. So it's all very controlled. But we run the supply lines typically next to the existing supply lines that are already there, and then it's a switch over. It's a one-day thing. The drain lines, those have to be removed and replaced, systematically. They do that. They start at the top and then they work their way down, and they're replacing it as they come down and getting the new drain lines installed and everything. As this work is all being done, we've got, building inspectors are coming in, they're checking everything. The plumbers are testing, it's all required, to make sure the supply line, it's going to hold the water or it's not. As soon as you charge it, you'll know that. But the drain lines, they put water or air in there and then they cap them and they put them under pressure, make sure there's no leaks or anything like that. Oh, then here's the fun part. This is what everybody really gets to see. It's the restoration of all the affected surfaces. When we do this work, we say we're patching everything back in, but we're not just doing a patch like on your wall to where it's just like, yeah, it's just this, little 2x2 section or anything like that. It's got the, yeah, that's the area where they remove the sheetrock. They get that reinstalled, but when they do the patch, they paint it from corner to corner and floor to ceiling to make sure everything blends in. Paint, if you painted something 2 months ago and try to come back and just paint a corner of that wall or something, you will see a difference in the paint. This is usually where I become very picky because this is what all the owners see. A lot of times in these units, people don't necessarily notice a difference if they're not having pressure or temperature issues, like CPVC, there's really no problem with that, except the lines have been breaking and causing floods in units. And Murphy's Law, if that one of those lines is going to break, it's going to break on the top floor. So that way it rains down through the other floors and just causes as much damage as possible. So when they come back through and they're doing all the restoration work, this is what everybody sees and, judges the work by.